Seneca Falls Convention was the first women's rights convention, occurring on July 19th and 20th, 1848. The convention was held at the Wesleyan Chapel in Seneca Falls, New York. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott met when they were excluded from the Anti-Slavery Convention in London in 1840. Together, they planned the Seneca Falls Convention with the help of Mary Ann McClintock, Martha Coffin Wright, and Jane Hunt. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was an activist not only for women's rights, but was also involved in the abolitionist movement and a member of the American Suffrage Association. She lived in Seneca Falls, New York, with 7 children. Lucretia Mott was a Quaker and a supporter of the anti-slavery cause. She got into women's rights when she met Elizabeth Cady Stanton at the Anti-Slavery Convention in London. In preparation for the Seneca Falls Convention, Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote the Declaration of Sentiments, a document based on the Declaration of Independence. It stated women's dreams and demands surrounding women's rights. At the convention, the Declaration was read, amended, and signed by 68 women and 32 men. The Declaration of Sentiments called women to action, with statements such as, "Resolved, that woman has too long rested satisfied in the circumscribed limits which corrupt customs and a perverted application of the Scriptures have marked out for her, and that it is time she should move into the enlarged sphere which her great Creator has assigned her." And, "Resolved, that woman is man's equal, was intended to be so by the Creator, and the highest good of the race demands that she should be recognized as such." One quote from the Declaration of Sentiments that especially stood out was, "Resolved, that it is the duty of the women of this country to secure themselves their sacred right to the elective franchise," meaning the right to vote isn't going to be handed to women, they need to fight for it. The words of the Declaration were so important because most women had been content with their small lives for too long. Their only duty was doing housework and caring for children. The Seneca Falls Convention was like a spark, and fire was to come. After the Seneca Falls Convention, people began discussing the need for women's rights. It showed up more in the media and even in general conversation. Unfortunately, as talk of women's rights appeared more, the number opposing women's rights also grew. Lucretia Mott wrote a lecture in response to criticism of the women's rights movement. Much has been said, from time to time, upon this subject. It has been a theme for ridicule, for satire and sarcasm. We might look for this from the ignorant and vulgar, but from the intelligent and refined we have the right to expect that such weapons shall not be resorted to, that gross comparisons and vulgar epithets shall not be applied, so as to place women, in a point of view, ridiculous to say the least. The idea of women's rights needed to be put into the media because change can't happen if the issue isn't discussed. Sadly, around the 1860s, the women's rights movement lost its momentum with the beginning of the Civil War, as many activists turned their focus to the war effort. After the war ended and the 14th and 15th Amendments were ratified, many suffragists saw this as an opportunity to push for universal suffrage. With the idea of gender-equal rights brought to light, more people began to support the cause. Many suffrage protests of all sorts occurred between the Seneca Falls Convention and the 19th Amendment, such as the Women's Suffrage Procession in Washington, D.C. The Women's Suffrage Procession was a major suffrage parade on March 3, 1913, the day before Woodrow Wilson's inauguration. The National American Women's Suffrage Association planned the parade to demonstrate how women are excluded from the election process by marching down Pennsylvania Avenue, taking the same path the inaugural parade takes. Thousands of women participated, including around 40 Black women. Unfortunately, most were asked to walk in the back of the spectacle instead of with their state delegations as planned. Many more suffrage protests occurred over the years, all because of the impact made by the Seneca Falls Convention. A new amendment was first introduced to Congress in 1878. However, it wasn't until 1917, when New York granted women's suffrage, meaning voting rights in that state, that there finally began to be a major change. There was such a shift in political balance because although some Western states had granted women's suffrage, New York was the first state in the East to do so. You can see the Women's Suffrage Party adding another star to their ratification flag. In the same year New York granted women's suffrage, President Woodrow Wilson began to support an amendment. This too was a major win for suffrage organizations across the country. Finally, the 19th Amendment was passed in June 1919 and ratified on August 8, 1920. After the 19th Amendment was passed, half the population suddenly had voting rights. Women's requests and/or concerns could not be ignored, since they had the support of voting power. In the following decades, with this new right to vote on their side, many women pushed for causes such as work regulations and abolishment of child labor. Sadly, not all women could vote with the ratification of the 19th Amendment. African American women were often scared away from voting through intimidation and racial discrimination. Registrars could also give African American citizens literacy tests, which were designed to be very hard to pass to keep Black people from voting. Also, the registrars could pass or fail people without an explanation. Native American women also could not vote after the 19th Amendment was ratified. They had to wait another 4 years until granted citizenship in 1924 with the Indian Citizenship Act. Asian American women did not get to vote until they obtained citizenship with the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952. Today, women can vote thanks to the Seneca Falls Convention and the women who planned it.